It was believed that Pastor Creflo Dollar was in charge of everything. The money, the fame, the global fan base, and the confidence of a guy who believed he had been chosen for something greater. However, behind that polished confidence, something was gradually unraveling. The individual who once preached about unshakable riches has had to deal with unexpected outcomes in the last several months. Creflo Dollar is now dealing with the one thing he never informed his fans they would have to deal with when upsetting facts surface. It's possible that everything he constructed was founded on a grave error. This ascent began in a snack bar. The life of Creflo Augustus Dollar Jr. did not begin in a TV studio, a large church, or a private residence. On January 28, 1962, it started in a modest house in College Park, Georgia. The family was shaped by discipline and faith. His mother was a counter girl at Kathleen Mitchell Elementary School, while his father was a police officer. At the moment, that little detail didn't seem significant, but it would follow him for decades in ways he never would have imagined. As a child, he never imagined that he would become a preacher. He still aspired to play professional football when he enrolled at West Georgia College in the early 1980s. A serious injury interrupted that course, marking the first of many pivotal moments that would influence his life. He began attending Bible study throughout his rehabilitation, not because he enjoyed it but rather because he needed something to do in the solitude. However, he claimed that one day he felt born again, and that experience permanently altered his life's trajectory. Before long, he was leading his own little Bible study groups, which expanded more quickly than he had anticipated. There was a young woman, Taffy Bolton. Later on, she would wed him and serve him for the rest of her life. After getting his degree in educational therapy in 1984, Dollar began working with individuals who were struggling with learning at the Bronner Psychiatric Institute. He was skilled at his work, but he was unable to resist the growing desire to enter the ministry. 2 years later, in 1986, he made a decision that altered everything. He founded World Changers Ministries Christian Center at Kathleen Mitchell Elementary, where his mother used to prepare food in the cafeteria. He participated in the first Black integration group at the school there. There were only 8 people during the first service. However, his message struck a chord because it was clear, self-assured, and practical. The crowds expanded swiftly, and his objectives grew along with his group. One of the largest megachurches in the U.S. would eventually be built out of what began as a restaurant. Because he preached about riches, he would gain international fame. However, its rise concealed fissures that would eventually widen and do much greater harm. The wealth that built an empire is the lesson. As World Changers Ministries expanded, Creflo Dollar's greatest issues sprang from the same message that made him famous. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Dollar developed the prosperity gospel, a doctrine that would serve as the foundation for his global influence. He taught that prosperity and success in life might be attained by having faith, confessing a good faith, and giving generously, particularly through tithing. There was hope for struggling families. It appeared to be a divine scheme for Christians seeking a second chance. The audiences grew with each lecture, each broadcast, and each promise of a breakthrough. He changed the name of his church to World Changers Church International in 1991 to reflect how far he believed God had sent him. He began hosting radio and television programs shortly after, which paved the way for the creation of Changing Your World. His teachings were transmitted into many homes. Toward the mid-1990s, he had left the local priesthood. His disciples lived much beyond College Park, and he was a televangelist who traveled the world. People in the UK, Canada, India, and Africa began to listen to what he had to say because they believed they could now earn a lot of money. The World Dome, a massive church with 8,500 seats that was completed in 1995 at a cost of about $20 million, served as a symbol of his ascent. Dollar maintained that banks did not assist in its creation. It demonstrated the power of faith and generosity, he remarked. By the mid-2000s, WCCI had grown to over 30,000 members and was generating about $70 million annually. Dollar presented his vision of 500 fellowship churches worldwide as the ministry expanded to include New York, Los Angeles, Toronto, Johannesburg, Houston, and the Gold Coast. But beneath the speed, anxiety was growing. His adversaries questioned him more and more about how he made so much money preaching about wealth. His supporters viewed him as living evidence that faith brought plenty. The skeptics noticed a change. A priest whose lifestyle resembled that of corporate executives rather than religious leaders. Rolls-Royces, private aircraft, and opulent homes. The distance between appreciation and skepticism widened with every new purchase. The machine continued to grow. Dollar believed he was creating a kingdom of spirituality. Others, however, questioned whether he wasn't genuinely creating something solid, something that would disintegrate if even one aspect of his faith were to be shaken. And that moment was drawing near. Nice stuff, lots of money, and the first structural flaws. As the prominence of Creflo Dollar's opulent personal life increased, so did his ministry. Seldom do pastors, especially those in the prosperity gospel movement, lead lives similar to his. While many of Dollar's disciples were impoverished, he possessed a $3 million wealth. The average family in College Park earns roughly $29,000 annually. Home in Fayetteville, Georgia, valued at $4 million. The address was 182. 5 acres with a private drive with a gate that prevented anyone from seeing the area, a large fountain, a pool, and lengthy stone walls. It came to represent both his achievements and the distance between him and the people he was preaching to. Additionally, he purchased a $2 condo in the Time Warner Center, a high-rise structure in New York City. $5 million before selling for $3. $75 million, or a profit of $1 million. Another New Jersey home was estimated to be valued over $2 million. His garage reportedly had a number of Rolls-Royces, including at least one valued at roughly $460,000. Dollar considered these things as manifestations of God's gift, while others who disliked him believed they were superfluous. Even the manner he moved around demonstrated the scope of his objectives. Prior to the jet issue, Dollar had been operating an outdated Gulfstream G3 for a considerable amount of time. This specific aircraft had already experienced 2 technical issues, one during takeoff in London and another over the Pacific Ocean. He said that a private jet was a need for the ministry, not a luxury, and that commercial flights didn't fit his timetable. The homes, the vehicles, and the jets made many people less likely to believe his message. Church watchdog groups voiced concerns. His refusal to reveal basic audited data resulted in Ministry Watch routinely giving his group a failing rating for financial dishonesty. 2007 to 2011 saw the U.S. He and 5 other televangelists were investigated by the U.S. Senate Finance Committee for possibly misusing church finances for their own benefit. Dollar said the government had no right to view his financial records, so he refused to hand them to them. He got through that phase legally. Despite some injuries, no charges were filed. For the first time, his reputation began to deteriorate. His adversaries noticed a pattern: he was a spiritual leader without being transparent, and he was wealthy without being accountable. These fractures would then go even wider due to an incident that would go down as one of the most well-known incidents in his career. The nation was shocked when a $65 million jet was stolen. By 2015, negative reviews about Creflo Dollar were nothing new. However, nothing could have prepared him for the public outcry that erupted when he launched Project G650, a campaign to raise funds for the purchase of a Gulfstream G650 private jet, which cost $65 million. The request startled even devoted fans. Dollar insisted that the jet was used for God's service and not for enjoyment. He experienced numerous technical issues with his ancient Gulfstream G3 from 1984. In London, the nose gear fell out, and the engine failed over the Pacific. Dollar claimed that since airlines didn't operate on God's time, there was no choice but to take a commercial trip. 200,000 people were requested to contribute at least $300 to the initiative. Religious organizations, social media, and mainstream news sites swiftly shared this appeal. Almost immediately, aviation professionals began pointing out issues. Although Dollar's ministry claimed that the new plane would enable them to transport 100,000 pounds of food and supplies, the G650 could only accommodate roughly 2,500 bags, which was significantly less than what the ministry publicly stated. The response was swift and powerful. Why a pastor required the priciest private plane in the world was a mystery to some. I mean, he might have chosen a smaller, less expensive plane. What were the consequences for his followers? Many of them earned far less than he did. Even within the Christian community, leaders voiced their opinions. Gospel musician Kirk Franklin publicly disputed the idea that possessing a lot of worldly possessions demonstrated faith, claiming that it demonstrated a lack of character. The financing website was silently removed within days as a result of the outrage from people nationwide. Dollar, however, persisted. He told a jubilant audience shortly after the incident, "I'm going to dream until Jesus comes back." He remarked, "You can't stop me if I want to believe God for a $65 million plane." The applause inside the chapel contrasted sharply with the rage outside. The matter reaffirmed the Senate's prior concerns over the integrity and financial management of televangelists. In the end, Dollar was able to secure private jets, but the harm to his reputation would endure. The jet was seen by many as a symbol of everything that people disliked, a preacher whose religion appeared to increase in tandem with his wealth. And a far more intimate and agonizing tale was about to start as the scrutiny increased. Family issues, an arrest, and the beginning of the public's disintegration all occurred. Creflo Dollar appeared untouchable for years. His followers believed he possessed unchallengeable spiritual authority, and his speeches were heard in millions of households across continents. However, things in his home in Fayette County, Georgia, altered in June 2012. Suddenly, the pastor who had preached about rules, faith, and God's order was handcuffed. The police report states that after an argument grew out of control, Dollar's 15-year-old daughter contacted the police. She claimed that when she refused to attend a party despite his warnings that she couldn't, he choked her, threw her to the ground, punched her, and even struck her with a shoe. The cops noted that she claimed the scratch on her neck was from the altercation. Dollar, however, claimed the police that he had only restrained her after she struck him first and that it was simply eczema. He denied punching or strangling her, but he did admit that he shoved her to the ground. His arrest became widely publicized within hours. The image of a pastor being arrested was a far cry from the weekly sermons he gave about family order and spiritual strength. His image was scrutinized more than before due to the charges, which included simple violence and cruelty to minors. The church cheered when Dollar told his congregation a few days later that the charges were exaggerated. Many people believed that Dollar was the victim of unfair media coverage and false information. Those that concurred stated that parents ought to have the authority to discipline their children. Some claimed that a line had been passed and that religious organizations were too supportive of the leaders and not supportive enough of the victims. The case was over in the eyes of the law. After completing a program mandated by the court to help him manage his rage, Dollar's charges were withdrawn. However, the harm persisted. Even some of his most ardent admirers began to wonder in private for the first time what was happening behind the scenes of the world he painstakingly depicted. Doubters also brought up long-standing concerns, such as the expensive residences, the unresolved financial troubles, and the widening divide between the community and the priest. There was more to the arrest than just a family issue. It demonstrated how helpless people were under the authority he had established. Ultimately, a single news article would rock that business far more than any previous controversy had. He informed everyone that a fundamental tenet of his ministry had always been false. The startling reality that changed everything. Creflo Dollar spent over 3 decades establishing his company on the belief that tithing was a divine mandate. He authored best-selling books about it, taught it on television, and repeated it repeatedly at conferences throughout the globe. Giving 10% of their salary was more than just a kind gesture to his supporters. It was both a religious obligation and a means of winning God's financial favor. Because they believed they were sowing miracle seeds, many people pushed their budgets. Dollar rose to become one of America's wealthiest preachers. His estimated net worth was $27 million at one point. However, he gave a speech at World Changers Church International in June 2022 that few anyone anticipated. In a sermon titled, "The Great Misunderstanding," Dollar informed his congregation that all of the tithing lessons he had taught them over the years were incorrect. He instructed them to discard all of the books, lectures, and DVDs he had authored on the topic. He claimed that Christians who were rescued by grace were never expected to give out of obligation, fear, or guilt, and that tithing was a part of the Old Testament law. Both fans and critics were furious at the unexpected turn of events. For some, it was a sincere act. Some believed that admitting it was decades too late. Despite being aware of his past transgressions, Dollar remained unapologetic. He claimed that if he hadn't been preaching those lessons, he wouldn't have acquired the spiritual wisdom he does now. However, many people were unsure of the time. His ministry's finances and organizational framework had been established on the very ideology he now disapproved of. Based on lessons he now believed to be incorrect, many questioned if he would repay the money that had been provided to him. However, Dollar would not provide cash information, repairs, or refunds. His private jets, automobiles, and expensive mansions were abandoned. Keep an Eye organizations repeatedly claimed that his efforts lacked accountability. The change demonstrated what those who opposed the prosperity gospel have been arguing for years, that it was predicated on shaky assumptions. Even devoted followers felt deceived and unsure of what to believe when they were informed that the primary reason they had been given had been a misunderstanding. Although Creflo Dollar's goal continued after his confession, many people's perceptions of him were altered. For the first time, the guy who taught divine order, affluence, and assurance was confronted with a new narrative. One in which the riches he promised others would not be enough to protect him from the consequences of his teachings. How do you feel about the issues that Pastor Creflo Dollar is currently facing? What are your thoughts? Is he responsible for the convictions he now disavows? Please share your opinions in the comments section below, and remember to subscribe and like.